Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechEd webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Be Lean, Be Agile, Work Together with IBM Rational Team Concert. Our guest speaker today is Ms. Sri Rupa Sen, Architect, Rational Team Concert Client Integrations at IBM. Sri Rupa Sen is the Architect for Rational Team Concert Clients Integration. Her areas of interest and expertise include software change and configuration management, Agile Development, Distributed Development and UML modeling. Please check out her blogs on jazz.net to find out more on what she has been working on. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Ms. Sen.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Rupa, and I work for a product called Rational Team Concert. And I've been doing Agile software for about 5 years now. So today's talk, I'm going to try and take you through some of the concepts of Agile, right? What the principles are, what the thoughts behind the Agile methodology is, what the roles are, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about how it is difficult to do Agile for bigger global teams, right? In today's world, Agile is not really about small teams anymore. It's all about working in globally distributed teams. And this Agile in a globally distributed team has its own challenges. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And finally, I'm going to talk a bit about the tool that I work on, Rational Team Concert. And I'm going to try and show you how Rational Team Concert as an Agile tool can help you get to agility at scale. So here's the outline of today's discussion. What is Agile? Agile at scale, and Rational Team Concert for Agile teams. What is Agile? So the first slide talks about the manifesto for Agile software development. Several years ago,
Ms. Sen, I would like to interrupt you. Your screen is not yet shown to us. So, please show your screen.
Okay. Yeah, I just got an invite from you to show my screen. I've accepted it. Let me know when you can see my screen, and I'll resume my talk.
Your screen now. Can you make it on full screen if it is?
It is on full screen. Yeah, it is on full screen. Can you see it properly?
Yes, ma'am, we can see it.
Hi, can you see it now?
Yes, ma'am, we can see it. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. All right, okay. So like I said, did you give me a presenter rights? Because now the presentation is not moving anymore. Did you give me presenter rights? Because I know you can see the screen, but I cannot move my.
Ma'am, you are the presenter. Shall I do it once more? Because you are still the presenter.
Okay, let me try one more time.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, got it. So you can see the first screen now, right? Outline what is Agile?
Yeah, we can see the first screen.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I'm going to kind of step back and start all over again, right? So in this talk, I'm going to talk about what Agile is all about, the principles behind it, the roles and responsibilities that Agile teams have to follow, right? Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how in today's world of globally distributed teams, you can practice Agile, right? Agile, when it was thought of, was primarily for smaller teams, which were co-located, and who knew exactly what each other was doing. And it was also for smaller projects as well. And from then, we have moved kind of on to globally distributed teams, which are a reality of today's world. And your Agile practices have to scale to fit into those globally distributed teams. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges that you face. And finally, I'm going to talk about Rational Team Concert, which is the Agile tool that my team has been building for the last 6 years or so. And I'm going to show, I'm going to try and show a few ways of how your Agile experience, especially in a global team, can be made simpler and more, I guess, useful by using Rational Team Concert, right? So this is, I guess, the most important slide in the entire presentation because it achieves to capture in a nutshell what Agile development is all about. So as you can see, the names at the bottom, these are a group of very illustrious software developers who've been doing software development for a while. So they got together and they tried to think of ways of making better software. Right? So when they got together, they came up with several sort of principles or methods which they thought would make the job of producing effective software better, and they called it the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. Right? So that's what it says, that they're uncovering better ways of doing software and helping others do it. Right? So what does Agile really say? It says that it values individual and interaction over processes and tools, which is to say that it values team collaboration, your face-to-face meetings, right? Your conference calls with your team members, and the togetherness of a team is valued more than the process your team follows and the tools that it uses. So that's the first thing. Building a trustworthy team, right? Enabling your team, having a lot of trust in your team members, and having self-motivated and self-organizing team. And we will talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. So that is one of the primary goals of Agile. Then the second thing, right, and I think this is kind of, after every developer's heart, all of us want to be producing working software and none of us like documentation. And Agile actually talks about it, but there's more to it than meets the eye, right? So Agile is not only about producing working software without documentation. It has several layers to it, if you will, and we will discuss a little bit about that. But the goal is to produce working software. So what these programmers found was that a lot of times very smart developers worked on projects for years together and they produced great software, but though that software does not really meet the needs of the customer. So it's working, but it's not working as per the customer's needs, right? And that is definitely not what you want, right? And they also saw that, sometimes for especially the older generation software, we produce a lot of documentation, how to use it, tutorials, videos, and whilst all those is important, what is most important that your software actually does what your customers want it to do, right? So these, the methodologies in Agile are kind of self-explanatory, and they're very, they hit you in the gut, right? They're very easy to understand. I think especially for, developers and software practitioners in any form, like testers or your release managers, product development, you can exactly see where they're getting at, right? Because these are the problems that we've all faced during software development. And, Agile tries to kind of have you take a look at those problems and hopefully solve it in a simpler fashion. So the third thing we talk about is customer collaboration. And this is an extremely important thing in Agile, right? So customer collaboration in Agile is much more important than what your contract with the customer is, right? So when you started building your software, you would have had some contracts with the customers that these are the features you want to, the customer wants you to put, right? But at the end of 6 months, maybe your customer's views have totally changed, right? And you have produced a software that actually meets the contract, but it is now very different from the customer's needs for today. So it doesn't really help the customer, and in the end, it doesn't help you, right? Because you won't enable your customer. So continuous customer collaboration is one of the key things that you do in Agile. Whatever you do, you have your customer involved, right? Maybe in reviews, in betas, in demos, right? Even meetings, right? Giving them screenshots, however it is, you want your customer to be involved all the time. And finally, responding to change or following a plan. That actually really sounds Agile, right? You should not be that you have this humongous plan that you have developed at the start of your software cycle, and you stick to it. And in the end, the customer says that, you know what, my requirements have changed. Do you think you can fit it into the plan? And you say, I cannot because I'm completely booked. I did it by the plan. That shouldn't happen, right? Your plan should be evolving. It should be adapting to the needs of the customer. You should be very easily able to respond to change, right? And Agile will, it sort of helps in showing you ways in doing, in getting there. So what is Agile? Here are a couple of slides, couple of pictures from Gilbert, which is one of my favorite cartoons. So I guess there are a lot of misconceptions about Agile, especially in the developer world, right? So before I started practicing Agile, when we decided to build the Agile tool, right? When I heard that we were going to do an Agile tool, I didn't really know much about it. So my impression was that it's exactly the same as you see in these cartoons. That Agile means that I don't have to design anymore, no humongous design documents, no UML modeling. I don't have to document my code anymore. Don't have to produce help, right? All I need to do is have some stand-up meetings with my team members, need to code rapidly and come up with some software, right? So I thought that speed of delivery was essential. I had to just be a very, very efficient programmer, right? And I thought, I guess the pointy-haired boss thinks here, I also thought that Agile is all about doing more with less. But in the end, you cannot really do more with less unless you have some guiding principles, right? So that's what we go to next. So for every stable development methodology, be it Agile or traditional or waterfall or whatever, right? There needs to be some checks and balances. You cannot just say that I want software that works and I want software that is delivered on time and I want software that responds to changes, right? These are all good aims to have, but in order to achieve these aims, you need to have some checks and balances. So what you need to do in Agile doesn't ask you to do design, there is no death by design in Agile, but you do need to design, right? You have to have a very good idea about what you're going to do at least in the next 4 weeks or 2 weeks or 6 weeks, right? You have to have a very good idea about the high-level use cases. You have to have a very good idea about the product that you're building, right? Even if you split the product into like maybe 20, 30 features, which you're going to be working on, one feature at a time, before you start developing a feature, you need to have a good idea about the feature. So in other words, you have to do just enough design, right? Not like a whole bunch of models and no humongous design documents, but you still need to design or architect in an agile way, right? So you do it you do a bit of design, you do a bit of development, you have working software, and you complete your feature, you have a demo with your customer, you move on to the next feature, you start your design process again, right? So it is not waterfall. You don't have a 2-month design process, but your design is sort of woven into your software life cycle. Then iteration and release planning. Agile doesn't believe in big bang plans that are made by the product management at the beginning of the release and that you have to stick to. It doesn't believe in that. It, however, believes very strongly that you need a list of features. List of features is called your product backlog, right? So what happens is at the beginning of the release, you sit with your product owner, you sit with your product manager, you sit with the customer representative, maybe it's a customer, maybe somebody from your marketing team, and you look at a list of features that are in a place which is called the backlog. A backlog is just the features that you would like to work on at some point in time, right? So from that backlog, you pick up maybe the 10 most important features, maybe the 5 most important features, depending on when you want to release the product. And those features now become a part of your release backlog, right? And then in your team, you start working on maybe 1 feature, maybe 2 features on every 2 to maybe 4 weeks, on every 6 weeks. So your commitment is that, in 4 weeks or in 6 weeks or 8 weeks, I will have this feature working. I will not care about the other features at this point in time, but I will at least have this feature working. I will be done with this feature, right? So that's your iteration planning. So iteration and release planning are very important in Agile, right? And it also gives you scope. So after, suppose you're developing feature A, and at the end of the iteration, you find that instead of feature B, now your customer wants feature C. And how do you find it out? Because you've actually collaborated with your customer. You've asked the input from your customer in a customer collaboration meeting, and he says feature C is more important to me now, right? You're still not releasing the product, but now after feature A, you start working on feature C, right? That's called adaptive planning, and that's very important in Agile, right? It's not like a big bang thing. You just don't do everything at one shot. You kind of break it up, take a lot of feedback, you move along. So evolving processes, this also is kind of a no-brainer in Agile. Obviously, if you're Agile, your processes have to be Agile as well. You cannot really say that, this is the declaration of the process that my team is going to follow at the beginning of the release, and the whole year is abides by the same process, right? Sometimes your processes will change, right? For example, at the beginning of a release, you might not care so much about code reviews, right? You may care more about design reviews. Towards the end of the release, where critical defects are being set, you may care more and more about code reviews, right? You may think that, you may have rules like, maybe in your team, the team lead can triage a bug, but a new joinee cannot, right? This is again a rule, right? And the rule might change. The new joinee 6 months down the line may become a regular team member, and now at that point in time, he or she may have a different set of roles and responsibilities and permissions altogether, right? So your process has to evolve to accommodate your people, to accommodate your iterations, to accommodate your, I guess, deliveries and your where you are in the software life cycle. You have to have an adaptive and evolving process. It has to be dynamic. Then continuous integration again is very important in Agile, right? In Agile, it's all about a bunch of developers working on. It's important that those changes don't break each other, right? Because one of the things that, especially in my experience with Agile, I see that you really don't have a lot of wiggle room, right? You say that I'm going to develop this software in 8 weeks, and you have to get done in 8 weeks, right? So you cannot really afford to develop a lot of buggy code, or maybe not buggy code, maybe your code works fine by itself, but when you start integrating with your peers' code, everything suddenly goes for a toss. You have crashes and you have null pointer exceptions and what have you, right? So you cannot have any big bang integrations at the end of the project either, right? Integration has to be continuous, and every day or maybe every half a day or every 2 days, the entire team has to integrate their sources together. It has to run the tests, right? It talks about the next point, test-driven development. All the tests that you have, right? And you have to be comfortable that your software is still in a working state. Right? That's how, that's one of the Agile goals. The stakeholder collaboration, we've already talked about that. Keep your customer and your business partners and your product management involved at every point in the cycle. End of iteration demos. This is very important, right? Because we talk about working software, and what better demo of a working software than an actual demo of the product, right? So that's what we do in my team. Every 4 weeks and sometimes 8 weeks, depending on the length of our iteration, we have an end of iteration demo where we invite our product management, and if it's a big iteration like maybe a release candidate or better iteration, we actually invite the customers as well, and then we have a webinar such as the one that we are having now, and we demonstrate what we've developed. We get their feedback and we work that feedback into the product, right? So maybe it's a beta 1 and I get a lot of feedback from my customers, and I work that into the product so that by the time beta 2 comes along, the customers like it better than they like beta 1. And finally, retrospective. This is very important. It's actually some practice, but I think it's done by a lot of Agile teams worldwide. A retrospective is nothing but a meeting you have at the end of an iteration to see what went well, what didn't go well, what went as planned, what didn't go as planned, and then you try to learn from your past mistakes and kind of do it better as you go along. So Agile methodologies, I have listed some of the more popular methodologies here. There are others that are existing in the in the software world, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about these methodologies. But if there are questions that we in this session, I do have some backup slides where I have talked about the methodologies in greater detail, right? So for now, it should suffice that HP is kind of all about putting customers first. It's about small releases, refactoring, pair programming, collaborative code ownership, and test-driven development, and so on. Scrum, again, is about learning from experiences, right? You learn from your code reviews, you learn from your design reviews, you learn from your retrospectives, right? Lean is about elimination of waste and doing things just in time. So basically, Lean is all about making your decisions as late as possible, right? So you involve your customer as much as possible, and then you make decisions about the product, and then you quickly deliver working software. That is what Lean is all about. It comes from, I think, the automobile manufacturing practices, right? And a part of Lean is Kanban, and Kanban comes from Toyota. It also kind of talks about things that you can do, and things that you're doing, and things that you will do, right? It talks about a pipeline of things that you will do, right? It's all about being just in time. And finally, there's Open Up. In Open Up, I think it's kind of I don't know if anybody in the audience has heard about Rational Open Up Rational process, Rational Unified process. So Open Up is, I think, kind of gives an agile twist to the Rational Unified process. It talks about use cases and user stories. It talks a lot about collaboration, right? And it also talks about doing riskier things first. So it's very risk focused. That's Open Up. So what's interesting is that they have subtle differences, but all of them have some basic practices in common, right? So all of them focus on iterative development and on incremental development, right? So you develop something, and in the next iteration, either you are done with that thing, or you make that thing a little bit better. You develop an additional feature, you develop an additional flavor to your feature, maybe you support an additional platform, right? So development is incremental, right? Self-organizing teams. So that I find very interesting in Agile. So nobody really tells us what to do, like my team we do Agile. So nobody tells us what to do all the time. There's no close monitoring. Instead, what there is a backlog, right? And my team and I, we will look at the backlog every iteration, and we decide on what we are going to pick to work on in that iteration. So that's being self-organized. Nobody tells you what to do. You know what to do because you're in constant touch with your stakeholders. Then time box iterations. Time box iterations mean that your iterations usually run from 2 to 4 weeks or maybe 4 to 8 weeks. And in that time, you're done. When you say you're done with a feature, you're done with the feature, you're done with the testing of the feature, you have a demo ready, you have the documentation ready, you have your, maybe your translations ready, you're done with the feature. The feature is ready to go out to the market, right? That's what happens at the end of a time box iteration. Then stakeholder collaboration I've already talked about. Working software I've already talked about. That's what you demo to your stakeholders. Continuous integration and continuous testing we've also talked about. So continuous integration, is basically integrating all the time. Continuous testing is to make sure that your integrations work. You have a suite of tests and make sure that whenever you integrate your software with that of your peers, it actually runs through all those tests and those tests pass. So the next slide is about Agile practices, right? In Agile, it is very important to be focused on stories, right? So you talk to your customer, or you talk to your product management. You have a bunch of user stories that you are focused on. You put milestones first, right? So an iteration, what we do in our, in our team, which is also distributed and it's Agile, what we do is at the beginning of a release, we have milestone builds, right? And those are the most important things in your life, right? And towards the end of the release, then you have release candidates, you have your betas. But whatever iteration you're working on, that is very, very important because you know that at the end of the iteration, you have to have working software and you have to be able to demo the software to your stakeholders. So you put milestones first. Then you work as feature teams, right? Maybe the feature teams are in one geography, maybe they're cross geography. But if you have a large team, you work on maybe 2 or 3 different features. But Agile is not about working on like a zillion features at one time. It's about doing a few features and doing them well, doing them production or release quality. That's what Agile is about. Then it also talks about having reviews and retrospectives, testing, right? If you produce APIs, you have to produce those APIs first. You have to have adaptive planning. You have to have a dynamic process and a product backlog, right? And we've already talked about some of this. You have to have new and noteworthy. So at the end of every iteration or every release, you actually have to come up with a list of new features that you've added for your collaborators or your stakeholders to kind of look at the features and decide on whether they like it or not, right? So it's all about transparency. You should not, so this is one of the things that kind of, made me scared when I first did Agile. I felt that, Agile was supposed to be transparent, right? Everybody was going to know what you were doing all the time. And that kind of freaked me out. I didn't quite like the idea. I was a little bit scared. But, as we grew into our Agile team, I realized that once you have a really a trustworthy team and you're working together and you're a bunch of smart engineers, being transparent is really, really good, right? Because just like other people know what I'm working on, I know exactly what they're working on as well. I know that if there may be chances for me to contribute, right? For me to give them ideas, right? Or maybe to help out if they're lagging behind on their schedule and all that. So it's all about transparency. And it gives your product managers and your development managers and your VPs a really good feeling if they know what exactly you're doing, right? There's no fear, uncertainty and doubt. There's no cutting of reports, right? Everything is transparent. That's what Agile is all about. It's all about trusting in your team and empowering your team. So these are kind of some of the things that are important in life. Your daily standard meetings, your burn downs, right? Like initially you, as your release goes on, the number of defects that you fix should be lower and lower, right? So you should finally reach a state in which you're stable. You don't have that many defects to fix anymore in this release. Then you have the ranked product backlog, right? You have a product backlog which you have done with the help of your stakeholders. and you rank the features. You say that these are the 10 most important features, and of these 10 most important features, these are the top 3 are these, right? And you work on the product backlog in a rank fashion. Whatever features that they're up on the top, you first investigate those features, work on them, and then move to the features in the middle, right? That way you're sure that your customers are getting what they want in the order they want it. It's all about code reviews and adoption from other teams and so on. End of iteration demos and reviews. I think we talked through some of these, right? So what's the agile way of working? Like I already mentioned, it's very team-centric, right? So what is a team? A team has members, right? It may be a global team, it may be a co-located team, right? But it has members. It follows a process. So I say that in my team, the process is that new joinees will not be able to deliver any source code without being reviewed by at least 3 people. Or I say that in my team, since we are nearing the beta, nobody should be able to deliver code without it being reviewed, or without, or maybe I say that in my team, only team leads can triage bugs, right? These are the rules. So these rules make up the process for my team, right? It's very, very important. And what is even more important, that the process doesn't become a hindrance to the team, right? The process shouldn't be in a form of big document that you hand over to your team members and you expect them to follow. The process should work its way right into your life, so to speak, right into your agile development cycle with minimum minimum interactions with you. The process should be just there. It should help you, but not hinder you, right? I know that developers always balk at the thorough process, but in Agile, the process is supposed to be transparent, and it's supposed to be sort of under the hood. It's just supposed to surface when you need it to surface. Otherwise, if you follow the process, it just leaves you to yourself, right? Then the team delivers to what we call streams, which are basically repositories of source code that is shared by the team. A team has members. A team produces builds. A team is responsible for work categories, basically features, right? So in my team, it's about a 70-member team, and it's working across 7 countries. So the team working in Bangalore is responsible for some features. The team working in Ottawa is responsible for some other features. So those features are what we call it work categories, right? And then finally you produce builds, right? You plan among your small team, then you have a bigger planning meeting with your release team, with your global team across the board, right? And the team monitors dashboards, like this is what I talked about, the transparency angle, right? At any point in time, my development manager or my product manager knows exactly where I am in the feature. If I'm doing well, if the feature is, if I have a backlog of too big a backlog of defects, if the feature has it's more red than green, they know that I'm not going to make it. I don't have to go and tell them that, the feature is going great. I don't have to go and tell them that, there's a risk to this feature. Just by looking at the dashboard, they should be able to know how my feature is doing, right? That's important. Then teams are self-tuned and share a common rhythm, right? So like I said, we have a large team of 70 developers, and instead that we have smaller teams, and the smaller teams are self-tuned, right? The rules I have for my team in Bangalore will not really match the rules that John has in Ottawa, right? Or I has somewhere else, right? It might not match them, but all the teams share a common rhythm. So we start an iteration together. At the beginning of the iteration, we know exactly what each other is doing. If we have dependencies, we resolve them along the iteration, and at the end of the iteration, we produce working software together. That's our common rhythm. So then I talk a little bit about agile roles, right? So the other roles, I think, fairly common in all teams. You have a team lead, you have team members and product owners, and probably somebody who does your design and your architecture owner. But in Agile, there is another role, and this in my mind is, it's one of the most important roles, the role of the stakeholder. So who's the stakeholder? Anybody who consumes your product. It can be your customer, it can be your product manager, your tester, your VP who is going to demo the software to the CTO of the company. Anybody who has a stake in the product is a stakeholder, and stakeholder collaboration is very important. So they actually have a role in the Agile project. So in the project that I'm working on, people with stakeholder roles can actually look at all the work items that I have, all our enhancement requests and all our defects and all that. They can have a look at the plans as well, right? So they are kind of woven into the Agile team. So this is all about Agile. Now I'll talk about a little bit about agility at scale, right? So when Agile started, it was really with very small co-located teams, right? And now slowly, as more and more people are adopting Agile, those teams are becoming global. When it started, it was with smaller teams, it was with small pieces of software. Maybe, teams started as pilot projects, or they said, oh, there's this like tiny little itsy-bitsy software project that I have to do. Let's do Agile, right? So that is how they started, and then they got hooked into Agile and wanted to move Agile into bigger and better things, right? They wanted to do real production quality software with Agile. They wanted the entire teams very spread across like 8 different countries in the globe to do Agile together, right? So the application complexity kind of became from simple, it became complex, right? Team size became more, from small teams to under 10 developers who were sitting across the aisle from each other. It suddenly became hundreds of developers who were spread across the world, right? The governance, maybe it was very informal before, right? You could just go and ask your buddy, hey, is your code working? And he gives you a quick demo, right? And you go and tell your product manager, this is how it works, and I've gone through the source code and there are no legal issues and all that. And that was all that the governance was about, right? But as you become more mature as an organization and go more and more into Agile, you may be needing audit trails. You will probably be needing much more formal governance, right? Then organization distribution, maybe when people started Agile, they just started working within their own teams. Now in the world of GTD, we know that we work as much in our own teams as with contractors or vendors, right? Third-party people who may not have the same degree of trust as your, as your in-house team does, who may not be given the same permissions on the source code as your in-house team has, right? But in spite of that, with all these people, you want to actually be following Agile, right? That's your challenge. So what are the challenges? Agile works really well for small co-located teams or near-located teams working in the same time zone for straightforward solutions. But, when the organizations started making Agile more popular, they saw that it gets harder and harder, right? They saw that they just cannot consider development teams, right? Agile started as a development effort. We were just going to be talking about like a bunch of developers working together. There was not much at the beginning. There was not much thought about, how to do release management, right? Who does our requirements gathering for us? Do we have a design process, right? There was not much thought about any of that. But slowly, as people kind of matured in their Agile methodologies, they realized that all those people had to be actually worked into their Agile teams and in a way that they develop software. So what the solution that people have found out, this is experiences of different people that I have interacted with, right? A lot of people actually hire Agile coaches to kind of maybe give their team head start on Agile, right? And finally, they need tooling, right? So what was very easy for you when you had small local teams suddenly becomes harder in a global environment unless you have really good tooling that evolves to meet your needs, right, as your team grows. So how are you Agile at scale? To optimize your Agile team, right, you do real-time planning so that your plans are never stale. They always reflect the current status, right? So if you are saying that I'm going to be working on this particular feature now, and I'm going to be shelving the work that I'm doing on this feature, your plan should automatically update it. You should not have to go and work on the plan. All you should do is you can, probably go to the feature and say start work, and go to the other feature and say stop work, right? And the plan should automatically reflect it. Or if somebody suddenly leaves the organization and has a whole bunch of defects, the plan should turn from green to red, right? It should automatically do that. You should not have to go and, kind of change your plan to do it. So basically in Agile, right, and in your tools, there should be a single source of truth, right? If there are X developers spending Y hours every week on software, that should be recorded in your tool only at one place, and from that it should be propagated everywhere else, right? Maybe you record it in your defect, right? Maybe you are fixing a defect and you say, oh, I'm going to be spending 8 hours on the defect. But that is the only place where you have to record this information. From there, the information is going to flow to your plans, maybe making them red, maybe making them green, maybe showing people what exactly you're doing. It's going to flow to the dashboard, right? Maybe once you fix the defect, the dashboards are going to show that, one defect less is remaining for your team, right? So there should be just a single source of truth. You should not have to do the same thing in different places, right? It's all about, like we talked about lean, right? It's about eliminating waste and having a single source of truth. Then traceability, right? It's very, very important. I mean, traceability is important all the time, right? Suppose you work on a defect and you fix it in a particular release, and then, you think you fixed the maintenance release as well, And then, maybe 2 weeks later, somebody comes and tells you, guess what, this customer has this defect. Did you fix it in the maintenance branch? And you're like, oh my God, I don't remember, right? So your tool should help you remember. Your tool should be able to tell you exactly where you fixed the defect, exactly which all bills the defect went to, right? Exactly what kind of enhancements or defects are associated with the fix that you made and so on, okay? In-context collaboration is the next one. So you should be able to collaborate with your peers in the context of the tool, right? You should be able to do code reviews and post-code review comments and have design discussions and have your test cases all attached in the tool, right? So that you should not have to go out of the tool to collaborate with your peers, right? Then development intelligence, we already talked a little bit about that. This is all about having good reports, right? Good reports for your managers, good reports for your customers, right? So many lines of source code, so many defects, this is our burn-up charts, this is our burn-down charts and so on, right? And having a dashboard, then anybody who logs into your system and looks at your dashboard immediately knows what is going on in your team. Then continuous intelligence, continuous improvement, which is to do with continuous development, continuous integration, and continuously improving your process from experience. We have retrospective reviews and so on. So these, in IBM, we call this the 5 imperatives of application lifecycle management, the 5 LM imperatives. And these apply equally well, actually even better to Agile. If you're Agile and if you're distributed, here are the 5 imperatives that you must fix before your team is successful. So you have to be sincere Agile, you have to be, get up and running quickly, right, across the world, right, and you have to extend as your needs evolve, right. So for all this, what you need to do is you need to choose the right tool that would help you do maybe heterogeneous development, right. For example, in my development team, we have J2E developers, we have Java developers, we have web developers, we have C# developers, we have like a whole bunch of developers. We have developers working on Z, on Windows, on Linux, we have developers working like on different platforms, on different methodologies, different languages and different machines and so on. Yet, all of them belong to the same team, all of them belong to the same project, they're working off of the same product backlog, right? So you should have the right tool that enables you to do that, so that you don't have like a bunch of tools that kind of, work for different teams at different times, but not everybody at the same time. So now that we've talked a little bit about tooling, my next few slides are going to be about Rational Team Concert, which is the tool that I work on. So at this point, if there are questions, you can ask those questions now, or you can go on, and I can talk about RTC, and then I can take questions. Are there any questions? Okay. So I'm going to be talking about Rational Team Concert. So Rational Team Concert is a team collaboration tool, right? So by that we mean that it is actually geared for Agile development teams working in a co-located or distributed environment, working together to produce software, right? And what it focuses on is collaboration in context that we talked about a bit earlier. Team first, right? Teams are like, they're first-class members in an Agile tool, in an Agile process, right? Because they're very important. So Rational Team Concert focuses on teams, it focuses on team process, and it focuses on transparency. So here are the things that Rational Team Concert, here are kind of the features of Rational Team Concert, if you will. It consists of, several, how can I say, modules maybe, right? First is the source control module. So the source control module consists of components, right? How do you manage your source code, right? Basically, when you're working in an Agile team on a particular, using an Agile tool, you will have source code that you will work on for some time, and that you will eventually share with the rest of your team, right? So our source control consists of, it focuses on components. Components are actually features. It focuses on workspaces, which is a private user space in a repository. It focuses on streams. Streams are basically your team's space in the repository. We'll talk about a little bit about each of this as we go along, right? Then we talk about tracking and planning, right? So how do you track the defects that the customers are logging against you? How do you track the enhancement requests? How do you track the tasks that you have to do for your team, right? So that is the other thing that Team Concert helps you with. It helps you with tracking and planning. It helps you with builds, continuous integration, right? continuous testing and traceability between your builds and the fixes you've made and your source code, right? Produces traceability. Finally, project health, right, in the form of reports, dashboards, feeds, and so on, right? So what is interesting on about Rational Team Concert is that it kind of has no dead ends altogether, right? You can easily go from your source control system, from suppose you fixed a defect, right, and you've checked in some code that fixes that defect. From that code, you can go to the defect that it actually fixed. From that defect, you can figure out the build that it made into, like the scheme that it was delivered to, right, the release that it went into. You can make out all this information from anywhere in the tool, right? If you're looking at a defect, you easily know where all the defect was fixed, right? Which builds and which releases it went into. Did you fix this defect in the maintenance stream? Did you fix this defect in the release in the main branch? You can get all this information all at your fingertips. There's an absolute traceability between your source code management system and your tracking and planning system and your builds and your project health, right? There's a single source of information, there's a single source of truth, and there is no concept, so there is no fudging of data, right? It is impossible for anybody to go and tell their team lead or their peers that, oh, I have worked on 98 of my defects if they have actually worked on 20 defects, because the tool will bring it up right away. It is also impossible to say that I am 80% done with my work when you're really, 40% done or 90% done. The tool will bring it up right away. So the tool takes some data from you, but it's very low key about the data that it takes from you, and on the basis of the data, it makes a lot of connections between different pieces of the data, and it ties the whole thing together. It ties your source control management system and your work item system and your plans and your bills and your dashboards together. So Rational Team Concert is a single tool with many capabilities. So the first is the process, right? The process in Rational Team Concert is a living, breathing thing, right? It is not like a process or a piece of paper that somebody has given you and that they expect you to stick to, right? What we do is at the beginning of when you create your project, right? You actually specify the rules of the process, and then the tool makes sure that the rules of the process are not broken. You can customize the process at any time. You can customize the process for a team. You can customize the process for an iteration. You can customize the process for a project area. But once the process is customized, then that is your new process, and then your team has to stick to the process, right? Nobody has to enforce the process. The tool does it for you. That's why we say it's a living thing, and it is trained by you as a team lead or as you as your product owner, okay? And it helps you track your tasks, right? So all your work items are smartly linked, right? What do we mean by smartly linked? We mean that from your user story, if you created a bunch of enhancement requests, then the user, when you look at the user story, you know exactly what enhancement requests are tied to the user story. If people have actually logged defects against the user story, they're linked to the user story. If your team has checked in code against that user story, that code is linked to the user story. If your user story has made into a build or a release, right, that is also linked to your user story. So basically your tracking system, your work items are sort of like, it's kind of the linchpin in RTC. It's like the central piece, and it helps you connect from source code to planning to your dashboards, to your builds, and so on. And the work items that we have, right, your tasks are totally customizable. Then, it helps you plan in different ways. It gives you a bunch of process templates, and each process template comes with a slightly different way of planning. In my team, we use the open-up process, and we customize it, right? So that it has some Scrum to it, and it's basically an Agile process that we customize for a team. So you can actually use some processes out of the box. You can use Scrum, or you can use open-up or Canvas, but some other processes as well. Hello?
Hello?
Can everybody go on mute, please?
Yeah, I was on mute, but this is from your side. I was typically on mute. I don't know. Now it's okay.
Okay, I don't know. Yeah, now it's gone. Yeah. So if you want to do open up or Kanban, you can totally do it, using RCC, right? Then managing your sources. Some of the important Agile concepts are about kind of responding to change, right? So if you're working on something and suddenly an important, maybe a customer defect has come and you have to work on that, you should be able to shelve the sources that you're working on and resume at a later point, right? Or if you're working with some code and you're not yet ready to share it with your team because you don't have test cases for it yet, right? Yet you want it to be saved in the repository, you should be able to do it. So Rational Team Concert offers you a way of doing it, right? It has personal spaces for the user in the repository. It has personal spaces for teams in the repository. And it helps you, create your source code, or, if you want to undo some changes, if you want to share some changes with your team, if you want to have code reviews with your peers, right? If you want to suspend or shelve some words, if you want to resume it, it helps you. It gives you a whole, we have a very rich SCM system, and it gives you like a wealth of features on how to do your source code control management better. Then be team aware, right? When you're a part of your team, you have to know your team, right? Basically, the tool knows it for you. The tool says, if you do something that goes against the rules of your team, the tool will stop you from doing that, right? You, as soon as you join your team, the tool sends you an email, right, with instructions on how to join the team, and with instructions on what your team is, right, what kind of defects you're going to be working on, and so on. So the tool makes it very easy, right? From day one, you can be productive. If you, what the tool does it actually sends you what is called the team invitation. It provides you a link, and if you link on the team invitation, it actually joins you to your repository, and it shows you your work items, and it tells you about your team stream and so on. So the tool makes it very easy. So we call it day one productivity. It makes it very easy for you to join a team, right? Then keep your builds healthy. So if you use Rational Team Concert, it helps you build continuously. Like as soon as you check in a change, as soon as you share changes with your team, a build is fired. And then, the build runs your unit test cases. So you can integrate your J units or N units or MS units with the build. The build will run. It will go green or red. And depending on that, you can decide whether your integration went well or not. And it lets you build at different levels, right? You can have your personal builds. You can have your team builds. You can have a team of team builds at a higher level and so on. Then we use dashboards for status, right? And again, we talked a little bit about heterogeneity in distributed teams. So I think the Rational Team Concert is like, it's a great one for heterogeneity. It actually supports multiple platforms. It supports it supports .NET developers, and it supports Java JTE developers and web developers, right? This is kind of our, I guess, punchline. From Linux to Windows, Mac to mainframe, Eclipse to Visual Studio, Rational Team Concert supports a whole bunch of things. And then it's very open for integration. So OSLC, I'm not going to be talking about much in this talk, right? It's a topic for another day. But, suffice it to say that we have a set of APIs, which is kind of industry standard, with which you can link to other tools. We make it very, very easy for you to integrate our tools with other tools. So this is the first thing, process, right? We've talked a lot about process today, right? An adaptive, evolving process. The teams work on projects. Each project follows a process. Different processes for different projects and different teams. And how is the process manifested? So, for example, if you say that I'm going to be following Scrum process, right? So it's going to have kind of give a different twist to the kind of work items that you can have, right? It's going to call your iteration sprints, right? Similarly, if you say that I'm going to have open up, it's going to call your iterations, right? So each agile process is subtly different from the other, with a slightly different way of looking at your tasks. And Rational Team Concert comes with a lot of out-of-the-box processes, which actually help you do that, right? It talks about, these are some of the things we already talked about. The process is manifested through preconditions and follow-up actions on operations, right? What it means in simpler terms is that, for example, if you're trying to triage a work item, or if you want to add a comment to a work item, or if you want to resolve a work item, you have to have the appropriate permissions for it, right? Or suppose, you're filing a build. You can say that once the build is successful, here are my post-build steps. If the build is successful, I want it deployed somewhere. If the build is successful, I want the build to be promoted, right? You can have a bunch of actions which are kind of follow up on a different action, and you can tell the tool to execute it, right? Similarly, you can have rules such as, it's really late in the iteration now, so nobody gets to deliver any code without having code reviews. And once you specify the rules through this operation behavior page in the process configuration, the tool makes sure that whenever you try to deliver some changes to your team, it actually looks for review. It actually looks to see if the review has been approved or not, right? And then it will let you deliver or not, right? So the process kicks in automatically. You really don't have to worry about the process at all. And what is really good about Rational Team Concert is that when there is a process failure, it not only tells you that it's an error, it actually gives you an advice, right? We call it a team advice, and it tells you how to fix that error. For example, it may tell you that the changes that you're trying to deliver do not have any work item associated with it, so please associate a work item and deliver. Or it might say that the changes you're trying to deliver are for a work item that you're not supposed to be working on now. You're supposed to be working on that in the future iteration. So please change the iteration for your work item, and so on, right? It gives you a pretty good advice, and most of the times it gives you advice along with live links, and you click on those links, it actually guides you through resolving those errors, right? Those process violations. The process has evolved as project progresses and automatic process enforcement. So as we talked about, there are different agile templates, right? And then we've talked about agile process specific work item types, right? So for example, if you have Scrum, your work items are called defects, tasks, retrospectives, stories, impediments. If you are maybe open up, then it's like defect, task, enhancement, RFS, plan item, track build item, and so on, right? So with each, like I said earlier, each agile methodology has a slightly different twist to it, and Rational Team Concert is aware of the twist, and it lets you kind of design your agile process following that methodology. And of course, you can customize it. It's totally customizable. You can have a totally different type of, work items altogether. You can customize your work items fields. You can customize your process. It's really, really extensible. And process, you can tweak your process at any time. Then, like we talked about, Agile is all about, it's all about just in time and just enough planning, right? So at the beginning of the release, you will have your product backlog. From that, you will be selecting a bunch of top priority work items, right? Work items are basically your tasks, defects, enhancements, plan items, and so on. And that will become your release backlog, right? So the release, in our release backlog, what we have is we have themes, right? So for example, if you see here, I guess here the themes are not being shown, but your themes may be, usability, accessibility, performance, right? New features, right? Competitiveness. You can have different themes for the features that you're working on, right? And that release plan defines your rhythm. You sort of say that, in the release plan, here are the top 5 items that I'm going to be working on this iteration, and the rest are in later iterations. So the thing about Agile is you just plan enough, right? You don't say that I'm going to be doing this 5 in iteration 1, this 5 in iteration 2, or so on, right? You have your release backlog. From that, you pick the top priority one, and you are just going to work on it in one iteration. You don't really care about the rest of the iterations. It may happen that your customer may come to you with a whole new set of things that you have to work on, and iteration 2 might completely change. So you do not make any such grandiose or kind of long-standing plans. You just plan enough. Then the release plan is coarse-grained, and it is visible to all stakeholders. So if you go to jazz.net, we have a release plan for the next upcoming release there. You will know exactly what we've worked on, where our release plan is, whether it's green or red. Everything is available to stakeholders, and that's how it should be, right? Because you want your stakeholder to give you useful feedback, and useful feedback comes when you're developing, not after the fact, right? There's no point in doing post-mortem in Agile especially. So then after your release plan comes your iteration planning, right? Like I was saying that in my team, we have several teams. We have one big global team, and then several teams which is site specific. And we have our own iteration plans, but we follow the same rhythm, right? We all have like for example, this week is a milestone week for us. Tomorrow is a milestone week, and which means that we'll be making a kind of a mini release tomorrow, and it's the same across the team all through the world. And it's important, right? It's important that in a global Agile team, you have this rhythm, this commonality in which teams come in sync with each other every 4 weeks or 8 weeks, right? So iteration plans are more fine-grained, and they are very flexible, and they have various views, right? So here on the right, I've kind of shown a Scrum task board view of my iteration plan, which tells you what stories we are working on, which tasks or children of the stories are still open, which are in progress, and which are closed, right? I could have had other views of my iteration plan. I could have had a work breakdown by user, or I could have had a completely different view that I customized, right? You can actually have different views of your plan, and that helps you in it's kind of from different angles. If I want to see which of my teams is overloaded, right? I will have a work breakdown view of the plan, right? If I want to see what tasks are remaining, independent of who's going to work on the task, maybe I'll have a Scrum task board or a Kanban task board view of the plan, right? If it's a release plan, I can actually see the release plan by iterations. I can look at what I've planned for iteration 1 and what is left at the bottom of the iteration, right, and so on. So it gives you a kind of a holistic view of the entire system. It keeps the plan synchronized with the current project status, and there's no need for redundant documentation, right? You don't have to like give a status report to your manager every day saying that this is done, this is left. Your plan speaks for you. As and when you update your work items to say that this defect is fixed, or this enhancement request is done, or this escalation is resolved, your plan automatically reflects it. As and when you make changes to the work items, your plan reflects it automatically. And from the plans, it can go to your backlog or to your feeds, I'm sorry, not backlog, your dashboard or your feeds or anywhere else that you want it to go. Tracking work in distributed teams, we've talked a bit about this already. The way we work is that we have a plan item that is essentially customer focused. It's a customer user story, right? There we have, we have stakeholder inputs from customers and product management. We have cross-team decisions, right? Each, for example, my team works on the .NET clients. John's team works on FCM, and Kai's team works on planning and tracking. So there are lots of cross-cutting things that we do, right, when a feature comes up. So the work item, the plan item is the right place to have those cross-cutting discussions, right? And we keep it out in the open, which, may seem a little alien at first, but actually it helps a lot. Because if your cross-cutting discussions are out in the open, A, your customers know exactly where you're going, and B, they can give their feedback as well. And you'll be surprised to know how many of our customers have very strong inputs and views on our plan items, right? How we should do it, when we should do it, right? How our concerns match or don't match their concerns and so on, right? So people are very, they're very vocal and they're very honest in plans, and that's the plan items, and that helps us a lot. So a plan item or story is basically a high-level item, and then you kind of divide them, their children as the execution items. Execution items are the enhancements, tasks, defects, and all that. So these execution items are the items to which you link your source code, right? For example, if you fix a defect is an execution item. If you work on an enhancement request is an execution item. So you have your top-level items, and then you break down your top-level items into execution items. And the execution items are the ones which link to your SCM. They may link to test cases, right? So you may say that this particular enhancement request can be tested by this particular test case. And test case may be in a different tool altogether, or it may be another work item in RTC, right? Similarly, it may, it may link to your requirements. Your plan items or your execution items may link to your requirements. And again, the requirements may be in a different tool altogether, or maybe in RTC. And these execution items are the ones that get included in your build. So if you click on the build in RTC, the build actually tells you that these are the work items that these are the defects that got fixed in this build. These are the enhancement requests that actually got resolved in the build, and so on. Like I said, we don't have any dead ends, right? It's like it's like almost a circular thing. So from a build, you can very easily see what all features and defect fixes went into the build. And work items are totally customizable. We talked about that a little bit. Then the next thing we have is parallel development with SCM. In Agile, SCM is, we don't talk about SCM much in Agile, but in reality, it's kind of the backbone on which everything else, builds, right? Because your SCM, your source code, is the most important feature because that's going to be producing your working software, right? So to manage the source code well is probably the most essential thing that you have to do in Agile. So in RTC, source control, we support several levels of parallel development, which is like, the reality of today's world, right? Especially in a feature team that is distributed, you will have parallel development. There will be people working on maintenance releases, there will be people working on main releases, right? There will be people working, in smaller teams. So the way we work is, when I make a change, it actually first goes into my personal space in the repository, which we call a repository workspace. Then I define a unit test case for my change, right? I run the test case, it succeeded. So now I share my changes, or I commit them, I deliver them to another place in the repository, which is my team space in the repository. So you have a personal space in the repository, which is all your own, and then you have a team space in the repository, which is visible to your team, right? And finally, when I'm making a local change on my system, that space is called the sandbox, because RTC is monitoring your sandbox. It's again kind of an entity in the RTC world. So you have your sandbox, your repository workspace, and your stream. These are the various levels in which you develop, right? Then your collaboration is based on change sets. So once I've developed something, if I want my peer to review it, a change set is really, earlier SCM systems, they talked about changes on files. but we realized quickly that when you make a change, right, when you're fixing a defect or like an enhancement request, it's really one single file is hardly ever affected, right? It's usually a group of files which are impacted by defect fix, right, or an enhancement request and so on. So that group of files is atomic in RTC and it's called a change set, right? So if I want my peer to review my defect fix, I give him or her my change set. When I want to associate my my source code with a defect and enhancement request, I associate my change set. So change set is kind of the currency in the RTC SCM world. You know, change set gets included in work items and gets included in bills and so on, right? And here I have sort of a view from RTC which shows you this, this here where it says has Philip's name. That's actually a change set. So these are the incoming change sets. As you can see here, I have a workspace, my personal repository workspace. My workspace is flowing to my team stream, right? What you see, those the little blue things, the development tools, file system, those are my components. So those are the components I work with, right? And then I have changes incoming from my team. Now, if I make some changes, those changes will be outgoing, right? They will show up as outgoing changes on my on this view. And eventually, when I share those changes with my team, those changes will appear as incoming changes in the other people's work areas. Right? This is how RTC works. It's all about change sets. So the thing about Agile is you're supposed to isolate the work, but you're not supposed to isolate people, right? It's supposed to be team-centric. So how do we isolate work? The repository workspace, right? It provides individual isolation. You don't have to make your changes visible to the team unless you've tested it or you're comfortable, right? Yet your changes actually live in the repository, right? So if your laptop suddenly crashes or something goes terribly bad, your changes haven't gone away. Yeah, so that's an isolation level. Then streams. Streams provide team isolation. If I want my changes to be visible just to my Bangalore team and not yet to the other teams, but to my feature team, right? Not yet to the other teams, I can do that, right? First, I will deliver my changes to maybe my immediate feature team, and then once my immediate feature team has tested it enough, we will deliver those changes to a bigger or integration team. So there is this hierarchy of streams that provides different levels of isolation. Then suspend and resume, we've talked about it a bit earlier, right? That suppose I'm working on an enhancement request and suddenly a customer defect comes, which I have to fix right away because it's using a hot fix. What I can do is, I can actually suspend the work that I'm doing, fix the defect, right? When I suspend the work, it kind of lives in the repository, but it disappears from my current workspace altogether. Then I fix the defect, I deliver it, and then I resume my work again. So that's an agile practice because it's very important that you respond to changes. You respond to your customers, right? So suspend and resume are again two very important features from the perspective of Agile. And then we have your team areas that we discussed earlier that provides your process isolation, right? My team's process is different from maybe the tracking and planning team's process, maybe different from the build team's process and so on. Then continuous integration with builds. So as soon as I deliver a change, right, we have continuous builds running. So continuous builds are, we try to get them to green, right? Once we have a green continuous build, then at the end of the day, the builds actually has built the integration of all the changes everybody has delivered throughout the day. So continuous builds run continuously. Integration builds for my team are typically once or twice a day. And then at the end of the week, when everybody has tested and they're happy with the changes, the integration build actually goes and builds on a bigger integration stream, of the higher level team, right? So we have personal builds for developers to continuous builds to scheduled or cross-component integration builds. So that's what we've talked about here. And each build comes with its set of unit tests. That's very, very important in Agile because at any point in time, you have to make sure that you haven't broken anything, right? So each build comes, you see the build here, it is green. If some tests are failed, it says that the build is red and it tells you exactly where those tests are failed, right? So that you can actually fix those tests. And then finally, we've talked about this earlier, transparency with feeds, dashboards, and reports. A feed is like a newspaper, right? The first screenshot is about the feed. It's like your team's newspaper. It tells you things like this work item has been triaged, this work item has been fixed, this change sets have been delivered, this build has failed, somebody has joined your team. It basically gives you up-to-date news of your team, right? Again, there's a single source of truth, and the feed just reflects the single source of truth to multiple users. And finally, there are dashboards, which are, we use it as developers, but it's more often used by your product managers and your team leads and so on to make sure that the project is in, it gives you live project status. It makes sure that the project is on track, or if it's not on track, what we can do to mitigate the risks of the project. And we have reports as well. Retrospectives, we've talked about this earlier. Every iteration in my team, and in most teams I think in an agile world, people talk about at the end of the iteration what went well in the team, what didn't go well. RTC helps you capture it, and then from your experiences, you kind of decide how to move on, right? What worked well, the things that worked well, you try to replicate. The things that didn't work well, you need to throw away. And once all the teams have done their retrospective for RTC, and this is probably recommended in most teams, we have a program management committee, which kind of has the leaders in the different feature teams, and those leaders then sit together and they make sure that the project has been steered in the right direction. We have a preemptive retrospective. Then finally, this is my last slide. These are some best practices for continuous integration. Maintain only one base for all your source code. If you do branch development, do it in a kind of a more maintainable way with different streams related to different, if your maintenance releases or your main release and so on, right? But let there be only one base. It should not be that you are developing your code in a silo and somebody else is developing their code in a silo, and then you try to do a big bang integration. You shouldn't do that. Then have 3 to 6 iterations. Update your work items regularly. So this one thing, it took me and my team a long time to get used to, right? Earlier we were scared to put things in the work item, right? If we found a defect in a peer's code, we didn't like creating a defect because we thought that it would reflect badly on the person. Very quickly we realized that it was not true at all. What the work item was giving us was a chance to fix things before it got out of hand, right? You can create defects. And now, we use work items to create defects, to have design discussions, arguments, discussions with customers, collaboration with our product management. We have different types of work items, right? Our support uses their own work item style, right? They have escalations and AFRs and so on. So every team has its own style of working with work items, and we update our work items all the time, because that, especially in agile teams, right? You cannot have face-to-face scrums, right? So now we've started using work items for our scrum status as well. So we have a scrum task board for like a quick view, and if you want the details of your scrum status, you go and look at work items. So you can use work items for a whole like gamut of things, and in RTC we make work items very customizable, so you can really use it to their full potential. Then automate the build. As soon as you check in some changes, or have a build automatically run, have it deploy your changes in a near production environment, have it run your test cases, and let you know if the build succeeded or failed, right? Build should be automated. It shouldn't be that there's a build master who goes and fires the build once in 1 day or once in 2 days and so on. Build should be self-testing, right? You should have a whole bunch of unit test cases. Test-driven development is the key to Agile. You should have a whole bunch of unit test cases. Anything new that you develop should come with its own test cases, and every build should test those test cases and mark them red or green. Commit often. Don't just keep working on your sandbox thinking that, oh, let me wait a little bit more before I share my changes with my team. I think share early and share often, right? That should be, once your unit test cases are passed, share your changes with your team. That's the only way you'll be able to manage your integrations. If your build fast, build machines should be like fast, right? It should basically be able to deploy your build on an environment, run your test cases, and give you back the report in not too long a time, right? If your build takes 8 hours, then it doesn't help you at all. Upload your executables. This is really very important for us, right? What we do is when we run the build, at the end of the build, one of the pages in the build is the download page for all the executables, right? And that is where I download, if I'm interested in some of the other features that my peers are working on, which is executable, that is where I go and download it from, right? For example, we download servers for testing, or we download the Eclipse client, or the Visual Studio client, or the Shell client. Everything that we produce, working software, is actually attached to your build, right? So that anybody, including your stakeholders, can download it. Test, and then make it transparent, right? Have it so that everybody knows what you're doing. So I think this is the end of my slide, right? I have some backup slides on Agile Methodologies, but that we'll talk about if there's interest, right? So now I'd like to open the floor for questions.
Thanks for the insightful presentation, Ms. Sen. Let's quickly take up the questions now. Please read out the questions and their answers so that all our users may listen to the commendable insights.
Okay, first question is in Agile development, where exactly automatic testing is used. So the way I can tell you the way we have worked automatic testing into our system, right? So when we make a change, we have a unit test case that tests the change. If it's an enhancement request or a big request, right, a big task that you're working on, we often have several unit test cases. Maybe they test the APIs, maybe they test the UI, and we actually deliver those test cases using the same source control system. We deliver the test cases into our team stream, right? And then when the build runs, it actually runs the tests as well. So that's how the test is automated. When you make a change, your change goes in with the test that tests the change. That is how tests are automated. How to so that's the first question. If if you have any follow-up questions, I think you can probably speak up now. The next question is how to maintain a timeline during the sprint. I'm not sure that I understand this question. This is by somebody called Kamal Kumar. How do you mean maintain a timeline during a sprint? I'm not really sure what you mean there. So maybe you can ask a follow-up question, right? And just explain what you mean there. Okay, if you mean, okay, one of the things that you could have meant is that, what happens if features slip? If features slip, they just go back into the backlog, right? It's not like, Agile is like the end to all your misery, right? You still have features that slip, the defects that were not fixed when you wanted them to be fixed and all that, right? So you, at the end of the 8 weeks, you have working software, but maybe the working software is not as, it doesn't have quite so many features that you wanted it to have. So the remaining features just go back to your product backlog, right? And slowly, as time goes on, it's hoped that you become better at estimating and knowing your team's velocity, how much they can work on, and you get less and less features that slip, right? I don't know if this is what you asked, but if you didn't, please ask for the question. What is the criteria a project should be to choose an Agile model? So I was just reading a book on Agile, and it says, I was wondering if Agile should be just for like people that build tools or people that build banking software and so on. But going by my experience talking to customers, we have customers in banking, finance, healthcare, embedded, right? And customers that use like Z boxes and so on. In defense, right? Everybody is using Agile, right? It's not like the whole world is using Agile, but we have like customers that range from embedded developers to developers who develop like maybe aircraft, to developers who develop financial systems, to medical healthcare systems, and to medical equipment. We have like a whole bunch of developers in IT systems and enterprise modernization, and they all use Agile. So there is no, and I think if you have the right tool, be it RTC or anything else, you can actually use Agile for anything, any project that you have in mind, right? One of the interesting things that have come into play in the recent years is something that's called, I think, water scrum fall, right? So a lot of people practice that. I don't recommend it personally, right? It's all about you do your development following Scrum, but your planning and your release management are done in a more traditional or waterfall way, right? I don't think personally that it would work well in my team, for example, because you really want all your stakeholders, including your testers and your release builders and your plan and product management people to be included in your Agile process. But there is literature on water scrum fall on the web. So if you're really kind of worried about stepping into Agile, maybe that is the way to start, right? So that at least your development team becomes Agile first, and then maybe later the other teams kind of merge back in. Next question is, what tool is the best tool for maintaining the dashboard? So the dashboard is maintained on its own, right? There is no tool. RTC has its own dashboard. You just have to open your web browser, be it Firefox or Internet Explorer or Chrome or whatever it is, and the dashboard just shows up there, right? There is a URL that you have for your dashboard. Basically, if you go to jazz.net or if you just go to jazz.net and you look at the projects we have there, each project comes with a dashboard. So if you click on a project, you can bring up the project dashboard. So similarly, whatever project you're working on, the dashboard will automatically get created and linked to a URL. What you can do is customize your dashboard totally. You can actually, I think now you can add open widgets to your dashboard and Facebook links and so on. But typically, we use our dashboards usually for, burn down charts, what defects are remaining, how our release is going and so on, for those kinds of things. How can Agile be scaled up from small to enterprise teams in a distributed and global outsourcing model? I think that, the second half of my discussion actually discussed that. So if you didn't get it, then maybe, we can have an offline talk but that's basically you need a good tool, right? That will kind of reduce the need of having face-to-face stand-up meetings or pair programming with your peer next to each other, right? So we still have pair programming because RTC makes it very easy to do pair programming, right? It makes it easy for code reviews and, you can share your changes very quickly with your peer and so on. But now the pair programming is across the world. So I think you just have to have the right tool, right? If you have the right tool and the right mindset, then I think going from being a small team and going into a big global agile team, it's not that it's easy, but it's not complicated, right? It's maybe a slightly longer process because it involves a lot of paradigm shifts and mental gear changes. But once you're through with that, I think with a good tool and maybe good agile mentoring and coaching, you're there already. What steps we should take to move to Agile from current architecture? I guess you start with your product backlog to see, Agile, it starts with an Agile planning, right? So first you plan, you decide on the features that you work on, right? If you're using, I don't know what kind of source control system you're using, move to one that supports Agile, right? Move to a source control system in a tool that supports Agile. RTC is one to choose. You may have be using other tools, right? I would say that would be the first step. And then from a humongous release plan, if you can break it up into smaller release plans or feature-centric plans, that would be the next step. Then you're planning Agile. And then you tweak you have a team area and a project area, and you tweak your team's process. Basically, after that, your tool should help you do all that. You shouldn't really have to take, apart from the fact that you'll have to use Agile coaching and mentoring to get to that mental gear shifting and the right tool. I can't think of any other concrete steps that you might take, right? You have to obviously move to an Agile tool. The next question is, at the start of a project, user story says very high level requirement, which eventually expands with multi-level work. In such scenario, it is very difficult to maintain a timeline. Okay, so what we have done is that, user stories are very high level. So what we have done is that for the more, in our plan, right, if you look at the current RTC plan, we have several stories that are well understood. So we already had, so work items are not just for software, right? So we have work items for investigation as well. So what we did was we created some investigation plan items, like investigate feature A, investigate feature B. So sometimes all we do in an iteration is investigation of a feature, right? So once the feature is well understood, we break it up into several features which we think will fit into an 8-week iteration, right? And after that, once the feature is well understood, it actually moves to the top of our product backlog. So the top of the product backlog, our product backlog, has well understood features. The middle part has features which are emerging, which we still have to investigate. And the lower part of our product backlog has features on which we have no understanding at all. This is how these categorized, and we have seen that it helps us a lot, right? That you move things to the top of your backlog only when you understand them fully, right? And of course, even with this, it's not like our features are always on time, right? They sometimes do slip, but I think, we are getting better at it. Ever since we moved to this model of understanding our user stories well before committing to them, we are getting much better at it, I think. Let's see. Does RTC have drop and drag facility like Rally or version 1? I haven't used Rally or version 1, they are competing products, but RTC does have a drag and drop facility as well. I don't know, RTC has various clients, right? It has the Eclipse client and the web client and the Visual Studio client. And all of them have in-context drag and drop facilities for work items and plans. So I don't know if you meant something else, but yes, to a short answer to your question is yes, we do have drag and drop. The next question is, how effectively can RTC be used for maintenance projects? What level of impact analysis can be done in RTC? So Maintenance projects. So now we have in our project we do have maintenance lines as well as the main line, right? And RTC actually makes it very easy because it helps you. People are traditionally very scared of branches. So in RTC, what we do is we create team areas that work on maintenance releases and team areas that work on main releases. And maybe it's the same person working in both team areas. Yet, I guess the difference is that in my role in the maintenance team area may be totally different from my role in the main release team area, and my releases will be governed by those rules. So after that, what you do is the way we work is when we get a customer defect in the maintenance stream, we fix it in the maintenance stream, and then we flow that defect onto the main stream. And because RTC gives you a high level of traceability, it is very easy to see what defects got tracked in the mainstream, what defects got tracked in the maintenance stream, and so on. It is relatively easy to merge conflicts in RTC, right? So if you are delivering changes from your maintenance stream to your release stream and you see conflicts, it is not difficult. RTC helps you merge it, and you can have your own merge and compare tool. So in the other hand, I don't think we've had many issues with having maintenance releases. I'm not sure what exactly what the answer you were looking for, but from my personal experience with RTC, we have worked with maintenance and main releases in parallel for a very long time, right? Using kind of a similar code base. Does RTC integrate with open source defect tracking system, or is that one of its own? It has one of its own, of course, like the customizable work items that I talked about, and it also integrates with ClearQuest and with other defect tracking systems through OSLC. So if you want to use RTC SCM but a different defect tracking system, if the defect tracking system follows the OSLC standards, you can link it with RTC. Similarly, if you want to use RTC's defect tracking system, but you want to use a different SCM, right? Then you can do that as well by using using our connectors. You can use I think Subversion, you can use ClearCase, and a few others. We have connectors to other SCM systems. So RTC is very open, right? It lets you actually switch out a particular feature and include a different tool altogether in place of that feature. I think that's all the questions. So if there are no other questions, I guess then that's the end of the presentation. So if you have other questions, please feel free to ask them right away. If you don't, then I think that's the end of the session. Okay, I hope everybody enjoyed the session. I think there'll be recording available from the TechGeek site. And my email ID is there at the top of the slide, I think. So please feel free to get in touch with me if you have questions on Agile, right? Or on RTC specifically. We have our site is called jazz.net. So we have a wealth of information on Agile Methodologies, RTC, other products that integrate with RTC. Right, like I said, we are very transparent to our stakeholders, including our customers. So jazz.net, I guess, is a living embodiment of how transparent we are. You can log into jazz.net, and there are lots of forums on which you can ask questions, right? If you don't like something in RTC, you can log a bug or you can raise an enhancement request. If you just want to read about Agile or about how we do things with RTC or about specific RTC features, there's a range of blogs and articles and wikis and how-tos and all that, right? And it's all available on jazz.net. I think, let me quickly show you jazz.net. Oh, I guess I'm no longer the presenter, but https://jazz.net.
Ma'am, I've sent you that panelist, so you are the presenter now. Just accept and show your screen if you want to show that blog.
Okay, yeah, I'm trying. That's it's trying to connect. I think there is maybe a problem with my internet connection or something. But in the thing that you're seeing here, the top left-hand corner is the Jazz.net site, where there is as you can see, there is information on agile development, and we have a lot of forums on where you can go and ask questions. The questions can be about agile, about RTC, about the other products that you want us to integrate to, right? About when you're practicing agile, if you're an agile practitioner, it can be about issues that you're facing and so on. Yeah, so this is the Jazz.net site. Finally come up. So as you can see, we have a blog here in which our team constantly blogs about things that we are doing. Like for example, we are just about to release our support for Visual Studio 2012, and someone from my team will be blogging about it shortly. So look at the blogs, right? There are lots of information about who is using the product, how they're using it, right? There's a very rich library, right, where you can actually find all our blogs and articles and so on. There's forum where you can ask questions, right? There's Jazz Hub, which is our hosted solution geared towards universities. That's called Jazz Hub, right? And then here's a link to the product. So one product, the product I talked about, Rational Team Concert. There are other products on Jazz. Our testing product called Rational Quality Manager. Our requirements product called the Requirements Composer. There's a whole bunch of products here. You can download the product. I think for small teams, Rational Team Concert is free for teams of less than 10 in size, right? So you can just download and start using it for your proof of concept project, or even if you have just a small team and you're developing small scale software, Rational Team Concert is free for you. So feel free to download it and test it out. A lot of people have done that, right? And then if you have any problems, feel free to ask on the forum or read about it in the I guess the blogs or the library. I think that's all I had. So Jazz.net is important because it shows you exactly, someone asked about the team's dashboard, right? Let me see if I can get the dashboard on here. If I can get it, I can just show that to you guys, and then we'll call it a day. So through Jazz.net, you can actually, we have a lot of customers interacting with us through Jazz.net, right? Because since Agile is all about collaborative development, we have a lot of customers who actually participate very vocally on work items, right? They give us suggestions, right? Most of our features actually come from customer requests or customer suggestions in the form of work items or questions asked in the forum or the face-to-face meetings that we have with customers, right? So I think a lot of what we do is actually because of customers, right? It is like we call this open commercial development, which means that we are developing a commercial product, but it's out in the open, right? And as a customer or stakeholder, you're like really very welcome to come and try it out or give suggestions or log defects and so on, right? I don't know where it's opening. I guess okay, it didn't open on the dashboard, and I think it's my internet connection is a little slow. But since if you've gone till here, right, you can just click on the Rational Team Concert project, and then you actually get our team's dashboard right there, right? What kind of defects we are fixing, how far behind we are in our plan, and so on, right? And be lean, be agile, work together. As you can see, that's our mantra. It's free for small teams of 10 developers, right? It's free for open source projects. It's free for the researchers and the people in the classroom. So for students, it's free as well, right? And then we have all these features, pages, and all that. So basically, if you can just have a look at Rational Team Concert, this would be a good way. If you go to jazz.net and have a look. Okay, I think that's all I had. And now on Jazz.net, we actually let you try it out in what we call the sandbox environment, which is basically a hosted environment. You can try it out as well, right?
Shall I conclude it, ma'am?
So that's all I have.
Okay.
Yes, please.
I'm really thankful to Ms. Sale for conducting this webinar. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of the webinar will be available on techig.com by tomorrow. Thank you all.